Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel discussion where we're going to be talking about banking in the age of Corona. My name is Julia Street. It's a great pleasure for me to be invited to host this panel. To explain, I'm the founder and CEO of my own company, working with fintechs from the smallest early stage companies to some of the biggest companies in the world who are really thinking about change and the dynamics of change and how technology can help. I'm really delighted today to be joined by a truly stellar panel of industry practitioners, and we come at this discussion with a really interesting set of perspectives. Allow me to introduce them, and if you could wave when I say your name. Diana, welcome. Diana Carrasco is the head of risk group digital channels at Lloyds Banking Group. Now, she's been working in the industry for nearly 20 years, firstly in payments and then more recently in the world of banking. And her expertise is in developing digital strategies. She tackles challenges from many, many different angles. Think business development, proposition development, right the way through to risk and compliance strategy. Diana, it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for joining us today. And let me move on then to another of our guests, Magdalena Kron. So Magdalena, hi there, welcome as always. She is a director, so she's the FinTech Platform Director globally for the Barclays Rise Initiative, or the Barclays initiative called RISE. So at RISE, Magdalena leads a team that is building a community of the most transformational technologies in financial services today. So think about 50 fintech companies, and she helps entrepreneurs connect their technologies with businesses, and she finds them and helps them realize the opportunities that exist both at Barclays and for Barclays corporate clients as well. So Magdalena, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. Wonderful. And Caroline Dawson. Caroline, hello there. Caroline's a partner at the law firm Clifford Chance. So as a specialism, she's a partner in the financial regulation practice at their London office, specializing in advising financial institutions and other markets participants on financial market regulation, mergers, acquisitions, both within the sector and also thinking about special areas, particularly securities and derivatives transactions as well. She was seconded to the EMEA equities teams, both at Goldman Sachs and also has worked on secondment at the Bank of England as well. So Caroline, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, which is fantastic. So we're going to be thinking about the topic of banking in the time of Corona from a number of different angles and perspectives. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, really think about the moments we went into lockdown. So where did your priorities focus? The day that your organization said we're going into lockdown as well. And Diana, I'm really keen to come to you first of all from a banking perspective. First of all, what changed and where did you focus?
Well, first priority was obviously what do we do? How can we support our customers? Because lockdown means it's a lot for many families in the UK, from people being furloughed to self-employed people not being to fulfill their jobs, key workers perhaps needing to rent a separate room to be separated and shielded from their families, a number of different ranges. So we had our retail team, our community banking team, group vulnerability team, just pretty much working 24/7 for a number of weeks, trying to figure out the best way to support our customers through this. And then obviously our colleagues as well, making sure that they, as many people as possible could work from home. For those that couldn't, making sure that going to the office or to the branches was safe enough and we could provide them like ways to get there and a safe environment. And for the ones that were, as I am, working from home, that they had everything they needed, from hardware and furniture to health and mental support. Because, I mean, it's not been easy for anyone, isn't it?
That's true.
So I think those were the first priorities.
And when you were looking at all of those changes you wanted to put into place, so how quickly did you get them into place? Did you get everybody fully functional and operational?
Quite surprisingly, it worked very well. Probably better than when we were working in the office. I think we were only dependent on ourselves and as an organization mostly, so we didn't have to get people traveling from one place to another, so that was pretty easier. But also because people wanted it to work, so people put an enormous amount of effort in making it work. It was a truly collaborative and teamwork.
And it's no mean feat getting a large financial organization to pivot and to reposition itself in such a way. Those of you who have been watching from the very beginning, you'll notice that I'm delighted to say we've been joined by Celine. Celine has had an exceptionally busy day. So thank you so much for joining us today. Allow me to introduce you, if I may. I'm going to go straight into your biography. And then I'm coming to you with the question. So there's no rest for the wicked. Here we come. So but for the benefit of everybody watching. So Celine is the Senior Banking Financial Services and Insurance Lead at Bold 360, which is part of the listed company Logmail. And Logmail delivers software as a service and cloud-based remote connectivity services for collaboration, IT management, and customer engagement. She's focused on delivery of technology that humanizes the customer experience. So customer experience clearly is at the very heart of everything she thinks about, but at every point of the journey. So whether that's exploring options for making purchases or even seeking support, and we know that a lot of people have been looking at how they actually get insights and support through all of this, but not on a small scale by any stretch of the imagination, on a truly enterprise scale. So Celine, we were just talking about what happened when we went into lockdown. So I would love to come back to your question, really thinking about what did you focus on? When the announcement came, you're going to lockdown, thinking about you and then also thinking about your clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, fantastic. Technology works great. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. So, yeah, I think personally, thinking of being in lockdown, it's very, very interesting because I'm coming from a technology company, and we actually enable people to work from home. So, and myself, I've been used to work from home. So it was probably more the sense of until when, to be fair. But then when we think on the more sort of professional and for other companies and institutions in this sector, I guess what we've seen, and we are still seeing, is that there's an increase in digital engagement now since lockdown. So that is not only digital engagement, actually video engagement, bot engagement, and people are now moving away from face-to-face and phone and email to more digital channels. So we are really seeing that big shift happening to more AI-powered tool to not only support digital engagement, but also employees' engagement. We've got great example, actually. When lockdown hit us, or COVID hit us, rather, we had customers like RBS that came to us because they wanted to make sure that they keep empowering their customers with digital channels. And what they've done really, really well during this crisis, they experience a very large amount of customer inquiries, to which they really needed to take on more staff to handle the new demands, to handle new products such as payment, holiday, loan queries. And they're using our solution to empower their knowledge base with AI. So the agent can get contextual information about customers and present relevant solution and information to them. So this solution is called My Knowledge, that they call it My Knowledge, actually. And during COVID, it's been really instrumental for them to ensure that their staff could resolve issues faster and could also focus on high value areas of customer experience. So this is a great example of how a customer actually could be reacting to the lockdown, really.
And Diana was just talking about actually when you pivot like that, of course, thinking about the personal experience of employees, and there, really the kind of the personal experience of customers who are all going through an enormous amount of stress and needs to have access to banks and financial institutions. What I would love to do now, if I may, is just turn to Magdalena and come to you from a perspective. So we talked earlier about your 50 members and your firms. For them, often really quite small organisations, not entirely. I know they're on the growth spectrum. Let's call it that. What role did you play, and where did you focus in helping them?
Yeah, well, first of all, so if we look at, we have 50 members in London and about 170 globally. So for you who don't know, RISE is a is Barclays Global FinTech Hub. We have workspaces in 4 different locations in London, New York, Mumbai, and Tel Aviv. And this obviously created some complexity in going into lockdown because it was happening at different phases in all different locations. But really for the fintechs, what we saw the most in kind of the first port of call and the priority for them was minimizing disruption and ensuring business as usual, as much as you can and could in that situation. So the CEOs and the founders obviously kind of assessing their resilience in the new with this new situation, and also how seeking both kind of advice from us, but understanding how could they reduce operational risk. And we saw from Barclays' perspective and Rise, we saw this is where we can immediately help the companies, and we did that through various different ways. First of all, kind of serving them as a customer and looking at that the priority of for them transitioning their teams and their operational model into a more virtual one meant that they were leaving the office. So they were going to use the office space in the same way, and we couldn't keep the office open because we wanted to make sure that it was a safe place. So we immediately pushed through a freeze of membership. So for April and May, that was one of the first messages that we went out with, and we've also now extended that throughout June. And I think that just that from an operational point of view for a small company was just so key for them to kind of take some of that stress of the cash flow going out. Especially it almost doesn't matter if you're a 2-man band or a 40-person company. It is an expense, and cash is king when you're an early stage startup. And then the second thing that we tried to do, was obviously pivoting all of our resources to virtual, and to really help the fintechs, because when I talk about cash flow, a lot of the government initiatives around business loans and grants coming out, it has just been like a big jungle to navigate. So we really just try to get different initiatives set up to help our entrepreneurs and our founders to do that. And then I guess secondly, like the priorities for these fintechs was just like, what are the challenges that are going to come out of this, and what are the opportunities? And a lot of the companies going into lockdown immediately use their entrepreneurs are very creative. They use their like, I guess, big brains to pivot their strategy. And we have examples of founders who completely just within like a couple of weeks just turned their product roadmap and rolled out product features that were going to come later in the year, rolled it out now because it just made more sense. So that was kind of it's that you're seeing how the entrepreneurs can respond so quickly, and which is really fascinating.
And we're going to talk about the opportunities and the road ahead a little bit later in the conversation. But there was something that actually the couple of words you used at the very beginning there, which really inspired me to kind of segue into bringing in Caroline at this point, because you talked about operational risk, and operational risk for some of the smallest businesses, some of the largest businesses is fundamental. And Caroline, I know you spend all your time thinking about governance, risk, regulation as well. I mean, what did you focus on at the moment we came to lockdown, both as an organization, but also advice to your clients?
Yes, I mean, I think probably it echoes a lot of the same points that others have touched on. So I think certainly the initial points to focus on were very much practical. So when people went into lockdown, we were left with people scattered all over the place, and obviously our clients were as well. So there were people who were on holiday, people who were traveling on business, people who weren't in lockdown in the jurisdiction in which they're normally working. And clearly that creates some practical problems in terms of, particularly if you're carrying on regulated activities, You need to think about the licensing angle. You need to think about whether those people are creating tax problems, either for their employer or for themselves. So there were some issues around that. And then I think also, again, just in the early stages, so dealing with illness, dealing with job cover, and I think others have mentioned dealing with those personal aspects of illness. So for a start, how do you know that someone's ill? So if they don't turn up in the office and you're all in the office, it's obvious that there's something wrong. But where everyone's working remotely, I think there's just that need to check in on people much more frequently just to make sure that they're okay. And obviously it might not be them that's ill. They might be trying to juggle work alongside dealing with sick children, sick parents. And when you know someone's dealing with illness, you need to then think about how you deal sensitively with that information. So I think the assumption would be that they're ill with coronavirus, but clearly a lot of people have had mental health problems. There have been other issues which have arisen. So it's just thinking about how you deal sensitively with that information, who it's appropriate to tell, how you communicate that information, and then practically dealing with cover while those people are unwell. So handover notes, access to information, but also for regulated entities, particularly thinking about their regulatory obligations, and specifically thinking about their need to ensure that certain roles are filled at all times. So just to take one particular example, if your money laundering reporting officer's off sick and so is their deputy, who's going to be receiving those reports, because that's a role that has to be filled at all times. And then I think probably the third main area where we got a lot of questions in the early days is, what aren't we thinking of? What are we missing? I think a lot of those early calls that we had with clients were around what they might be missing, because obviously there's a huge amount going on at the outset. People were dealing with emergencies left, right and centre, as well as trying to carry on business as usual. And they didn't necessarily have that space, that breathing space to stop and develop a checklist of other issues that they might need to be thinking about, which weren't sort of pushing themselves forward at that time.
And it is fascinating, isn't it? Because it's almost at a time of, I hate to use the expression, but unprecedented change. Of course, there's so much that there are so many unknowns as we go through. And what I'd love to do now is kind of move the discussion on a bit in terms of thinking about as time passed, during this kind of 2+ month sort of period of lockdown, is what's been particularly challenging, and if there's anything that's particularly sort of surprised us as well. And Celine, I'm going to come to you first of all, because thinking about this from an enterprise adoption and client engagement point of view, what's particularly sort of surprised you, and what have clients found particularly challenging?
Yeah, so I think that I can definitely speak here from an enterprise adoption and client engagement perspective. So if you look at the role of the financial world in these crises, it has definitely had a major task to play, specifically in stabilizing the economic situation as soon as possible. And to do this, they had to be able to provide companies with the necessary support quickly to ensure their survival. So I guess what really surprised me, or what I found quite challenging from financial institutions, is how they were enabled technology-wise to cope with all of these, and the impact on customer engagement as a result. So I think COVID has really unveiled some of the weaknesses on this industry, and one in particular being digital transformation and digital enablement. If you look at what happened, and we all know that overnight entire departments have had to temporarily work from home, but that has really caused banks to be confronted with, again, using the same word, unprecedented IT and technology challenges, especially when most of them still have in-house or more traditional based systems. So although many banks have started their digital transformation a couple years ago, suddenly many of them were no longer able to do their job or offer digital support to their customers during COVID. So for how long since lockdown have we seen that do not call unless it is urgent email, or seeing it on the website as a banner? I think customers should not be the one adapting to companies, no matter if we are in crises, but companies should be able to adapt to their customers rather. So I think the lack of true digital support strategy has really created the opposite effect of that email, for example, the calling unless it is urgent. I think people kept on calling, and it created a more unmanageable workload for the agents that are not being in their normal environment, that are in reduced capacity. And really part of the challenge, I think, is also that even in normal times, most banks are not really well equipped to help customers digitally self-serve. So if you look at the customer journey, for example, to acquire a new financial product, it's quite often cumbersome. So it causes many drop-off. I think even my own experience during COVID has been sometimes quite frustrating, trying to look for new products or information, and I couldn't really get it online. So I had to call, couldn't get someone on the phone. So went elsewhere where I could be digitally supported. So I think in time like that, when customers really need support and answer to their questions, it's really where we see the value of an AI-powered self-service solution that can really help institutions in this industry make the difference. And of course, there will be cases where self-service cannot completely solve the problem. But I think it can certainly help by letting the customer know that, know what to expect as they start the process of reaching out to customer service, and also by helping other calls, other agents being free of this repetitive or low value query, and help them really work on resolving the more pressing and time sensitive issues.
Yeah, and particularly when you're trying to deal with this at some scale, urgency and scale, which is the ultimate conundrum, isn't it? And it's so important to individuals. And yes, of course, as you say, in the mix of things, actually, how does it occupy your time and your attention? Yeah. Thank you so much for your thoughts. That was really, really interesting. I'd love to bring in Magdalena here when we think about, what surprised you from your membership engagements and how you've been working with your fintechs.
I guess what surprised me initially was just that we managed to pivot our physical model quite quickly to a digital model, and we're still kind of perfecting or trying to make the customer experience really sleek. But in terms of delivering different programs and kind of workshops and events, we did that quite quickly, and a lot of it is also around focusing around how do we continue to bring that connectivity between the fintechs and the bank. And we've seen that actually some people seem to be more available in the time of working from home and being able to speak to some of the companies that we wanted them to meet. So that has been a great surprise. Then obviously there's been the challenge has been the operational point of view, where it's just the uncertainty, and you're trying to make decisions on things with answers with a little, very little information of how you can make the analysis. So that has been an interesting process.
I can imagine. And of course, in the world of the unknown and the uncertain, one thing we can be sure, Caroline, is that there's always regulation, and there is always an appetite to understand, good rigorous compliance. And it's very interesting to hear your comments earlier about actually how do you do that when there are human beings and senior officers involved in that. Love to also kind of hear your thoughts on, what's been challenging, what's been surprising as you've been navigating actually the lockdown period.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe not so much surprising, because I guess if you had some breathing space to think about some of these issues and how they'd arise in the context of a pandemic, then maybe you would have come up with them already. But I think some of the issues which arose, which are unexpected or which people hadn't prepared for so much. So, for example, business continuity plans. So if there's some kind of business interruption event and everyone has to work remotely from the office, what's envisaged in most people's business continuity plans is moving your business wholesale to another location. So they essentially envisage some kind of interruption with your primary business site. You can't get onto your main business premises, so you have to go elsewhere, and everyone goes elsewhere together. What they didn't really envisage was everyone being scattered all over the place, everyone in their own individual bubble. So I think that threw up a number of issues in terms of just trying to carry on as usual. And things like how you comply with some of those everyday supervisory obligations, so things like telephone recording obligations. So for a start, you've got the fact that all of a sudden you've got people who are now accessing calls from their home telephone number or from their mobile, and it might not be a recorded mobile. So how are you complying with those obligations that you have where you're conducting regulated business to make sure that all of those communications are recorded? If you're doing calls over video, the rules don't really envisage that. You know, they talk about keeping a record of the conversation. So is it adequate if you only record the audio and you're not actually recording the visual as well? So there are a number of things like that. I suppose just thinking about how a trading floor operates, normally you'd have people on hand to answer questions, to make sure that, you know, you've got adequate oversight and supervision. And again, if you've got people scattered all over the place, how are you replicating that supervision and that oversight and making sure that people are always accessible? I think probably the other big one has been, and again, probably not unexpected, but an increased risk of fraud and money laundering. So particularly if you're onboarding clients, if you're doing KYC checks remotely, some businesses are going to be set up to do that, but I think there are quite a lot of traditional businesses where the expectation is that you come into the branch with your passport to have that scanned. So how are you doing all of those checks remotely? Celine mentioned some of the government funding initiatives. So if you've got a massive wave of people all of a sudden applying for these loans and these funding initiatives, the risk clearly of fraudulent applications or just people who maybe arbitrage the lack of clarity in the government criteria for those loans. Again, there's a risk there. I think the other one has been impersonation of government departments. And I think when we first went into lockdown, I think everyone got a text on their mobile phone saying, you know, stay home, whatever it was, stay home, stay safe, protect the NHS. And sadly, that's proved to be an opportunity for people to say, oh, actually, you know, people got used to the idea that you're getting a text message from the government. So now I'm going to text someone and pretend to be the NHS, pretend to be. So I think my local council gave the example of someone who was texting people to say, purporting to be from the local police, saying, we've noticed that you were leaving the house more than once in any 24-hour period. So you now need to report to wherever. You're going to be given an on-the-spot penalty. You can avoid coming out to your local police station by just paying via this bank number. So just preparing people for all those sorts of issues, I think, wasn't necessarily something that people were set up to do.
It's quite deeply concerning, isn't it? Because you're catching people, but also, you know, there's innovation in the financial crime compliance area as well. Which, and as we look ahead a little bit, we're going to sort of probably explore some of that. Diana, thank you for all your thoughts on that. And Diana, I want to come back to you because you were talking at the very beginning about, you know, the reality of having teams and managing teams, and you mentioned there about you know, resilience and mental health particularly. And I'd love to explore this, not so much from a banking perspective actually with you, but much more of an organizational leadership point of view about, you know, what's been challenging, and again, you're really kind of what surprised you about everybody all of a sudden being scattered everywhere.
So I guess the most challenging bit has been stretching that work-life balance to its as much as we ever thought that it could be stretched, right? So suddenly most of us have seen ourselves quite unexpectedly performing a number of full-time jobs. So we are full-time parents, we are full-time cleaners and full-time cooks and full-time teachers and full-time dog workers, and we're full-time married to the person that's locked with us. And then also we have to work, right? So as far as I know, superheroes are not real, or either hiding well. Don't tell that to my son. But I think that has been the greatest challenge, because every situation is different. So we've got people really stressed about having to take care of all these responsibilities, and at the same time being really worried about the parents or people they have to care about, people that had to shield themselves because they have particular health issues, people dealing with the stress of this situation better than others and coping better than others. And we also have people that perhaps have less obligations or they manage them better, and suddenly they have a lot of time, as Magdalena was saying, to actually be more productive in the hours they're spending at home. And balancing the teams in that way and making sure that it works for everyone. I think that has been probably the most challenging bit. And going to the question about what has surprised me, I guess, on a positive way, is how well it has worked, how well everybody has understood everyone else's needs and respected them and just jumped in to support a member of the team, regular check-ins also, as someone was saying, and how it's been like the bonding with the team has been actually improved, because end of the day you're inviting people you normally only work with into your home, so they have seen my bedroom, they have seen my living room, they know my family now, they know what I'm worried about, they know what I'm cooking also and what wine I like to drink, and all those conversations have actually been good for the team, I think, and people being more open and honest and transparent and saying, guys, today I just can't work anymore. I mean, it's Thursday 2:00 and it feels like Friday 7 p.m. so I'm just gonna log off. I can't. And people accepting that and saying, don't worry, it's anything urgent, can I cover for you? And we've imposed, as a team, we've sort of imposed ourselves things like times of the day and hours of the day, times in the week that we've defined as meeting free. So from lunchtime for 2 hours when possible, and a couple of afternoons with, if it's something that has to happen, we've tried to keep them also meeting. And there's also, I think, this reinforcing through the bank, through the group in general, that all colleagues have to feel very, very proud of what they can do through this time, because it's not easy, rather than guilty for what they cannot do. And if you're in a 35-hour week and you're managing to get 15 hours done, well, those are 15 hours that you need to feel proud of. And not guilty for the rest, because someone else will be in a different situation at some other time, and then maybe you can jump in to help them, to support them. I guess that's team's management.
And that's the thing, is it good from a very personal, we talk about, kind of bringing humans into workspaces, and of course humans have been put into under inordinate amounts of stress really the last kind of two or 3 months, and leaders have to think very differently about how they manage their teams of people who are going through different realities. Some people are very isolated, some people are bombarded by family around them. It's everybody's got their own story really. What I'd love to do now, actually, Diana, I'm going to stay with you. Actually, I'm going to ask you a different question, which is really around some of the enabling technologies. So as we've been going through the last 2 months, and then particularly I'd like to begin to look a bit further ahead as well. Technology is an amazing enabler. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the developments that really helped you, tech that's really helped you, and particularly thinking about now to your clients and how they've navigated banking in the time of Corona.
Yeah, what can I say? So digital channels have obviously been the main taking the starring part in banking in the time of Corona, and I cannot imagine having had this crisis 15 years ago. It would have been very, very different, and from a personal and professional perspective. So definitely online banking and digital banking through digital channels has seen a peak. So our net promoter score has roofed, and it's tested our channels up to the most, and all the tests that we could have ever, stress tests that we could have ever thought of, have all happened in reality in a small amount of time. But I guess the reflection is about how can we support all our customers, including those for which digital was not their channel of choice. And let me expand a little bit with that, because for all of us that were already banking digitally a little or a lot, it has just meant that we are doing that more, and the channels have to be there available for us, and just not failing us. But there's these other people for which the channel of choice would have naturally been a branch or telephony banking that have now been forced into digital without necessarily willing to or being prepared for. And as an example, 3 times more 70 years old and up have registered for online banking in this period at the same time last year.
Wow.
So I guess, and it's a lot of people that are not precisely technology savvy, or they don't want to, but now they have to. So we have partnered with a charity called We Are Digital, and we're delivering a number of 70 years old that have to shield tablets for free. And also with this charity, we have launched a telephony line helping people to get online for the first time and get them set up with the tablets and how to use them. We're expecting to help about 20,000 customers to this phone line, not only to bank online, but also to be use online, use digital for this period of time and for the future, for everything else, for groceries, for being closer to the relatives, for ordering anything that they need, for contacting the NHS and following the news, anything.
Any particular examples of your fintech firms where certain products and services and propositions have just flown off the shelf during Corona?
Well, actually, I can pick up on one on the open banking, and it's interesting to see the amount of I think the open banking is going to accelerate with this crisis. And if we look more into the future, there's going to be a lot more propositions coming out, and they're going to be more relevant to customers. A lot around the lending space and the credit space will definitely have a huge impact on how we connect our banking services for our individual customers. Then other examples that I've also seen that are more kind of like B2B focused, and I think, Celine, you have touched on this quite a lot, is the AI, the data modeling, etc. We have a few of our fintech members who quite quickly got roped in to work with the government on the many different initiatives that they have around just organizing and sorting out their data and making sure that they can use this in a more productive way to help in different areas as we're going through this crisis and kind of these going into a very different future. So yeah, those are the two interesting areas, I think, to watch.
And I'd love to go back to your thoughts in a second, Celine, if I will. But in the meantime, I'm going to just go to one other, which I think will tee you up beautifully, because I think the constant through everything is the data and the governance and the APIs and the infrastructure. But Caroline, before we do that, in the world of RegTech, you were talking there about trading floor surveillance and new innovation that's been coming out. Have you seen any particular areas of enabling technology that have helped with remote teams and remote working?
So probably the things which have been the most helpful have been platforms and technology that have been available all along, and maybe people just haven't adopted to a massive extent so far. So I suppose really thinking about things like video calling technology, so Zoom, LoopUp, obviously other systems are available. There have been niggles to sort out, say things like limits on the number of lines that can connect, making sure that you can rely on the confidentiality of information that's discussed on the call, and making sure also that if you've got people dialing in on audio only, if you're discussing confidential information, that you've actually got some kind of knowledge of who's on the line. So there have certainly been some things to sort out along the road, but I think in terms of keeping in touch remotely, we've seen a massive uptake of those video conferencing services. Things like e-signature platforms, so platforms such as DocuSign, again, they've been available for some time, but now we're starting to see a massive increased uptake in access to those platforms. Document editing tools. So I think Diana mentioned clients who maybe don't access digitally through choice. I think there are quite a lot of employees who don't access digital technology through choice. So I think the default approach for a lot of people, whether you're marking up a presentation for a roadshow, whether you're marking up an agreement that you're negotiating, I think the default approach has often been for people to print that document out and then send handwritten markups, particularly if you've just got a couple of little nits. So I think definitely in this process, we've seen a lot more uptake of document editing tools that mean you don't need to print that document off. and at least you can make sure that everyone always knows that they're working from the latest version in the system. I think probably the last thing is we've seen over the last sort of 10 years or so, there's been a general move away from sending out hard copy agreements and bank statements, investment statements, having in-person meetings or in-person trading as well. There's been a general move away from that. But there have always been holdouts, so clients who prefer to have hard copy documents, clients who prefer to sign things in wet ink, and traditional trading arrangements as well. So things like the London Metal Exchange ring, or Lloyd's of London as well, where traditionally you do have this very in-person and face-to-face approach. And again, obviously that just hasn't been possible during the lockdown period. So the technology is generally there to support all of these interactions, to support those electronic documents and statements, to support remote trading. And I think really this has given a bit of a push to people to move more of that trading and more of that activity onto electronic platforms and to execute them digitally.
Well, we're going to move on in a second to kind of what comes next and what the future looks like. But Celine, I have to come back to you. Obviously, not only, I mean, I refer back to some of your early comments about the artificial intelligence and some of those enabling technologies. Really keen to hear your thoughts on what have been the big enabling technologies throughout this period of lockdown, particularly with the lens of banking.
Yeah, and and I think I'll focus. I respond with focusing on digital support and customer service. So because at LogMeIn we offer both. So we offer remote working tools, but also AI digital engagement solution to support customers online. So I think as a technology company, what we really realized since COVID is that sometimes it feels a little bit like we are in a world where the questions outweigh the answers. And by that, I mean, for instance, you have people looking for new store hours or whether actually stores are even open. Employees are searching for how to connect to their company's network from home, and families are trying to understand what virtual schooling is and how long it will last. So we really noticed that getting answers out to customers, employees, and partners shouldn't be a barrier for organizations, and especially in time with so much uncertainty. So as a company offering AI digital engagement solution, we really understand how important it is to get information out to stakeholders and how it can be a challenge during this time of COVID. So I think that there is nothing more frustrating that when looking for information, you hit a very long and static FAQ document, and you can't find the answer you want, or you're searching through a static FAQ page by guessing which keyword will actually help me get the answer I want. So one of the key challenges we really see our customers having during COVID is in fact the fact that the policies and procedures have been changing rapidly. So they could not really cope with providing real-time and up-to-date information. So to answer the challenge as a technology company, we help customers in many ways, and I highlighted some of them earlier with the example of RBS or the other large UK insurer. But to support companies even more rapidly, Bolt 360 as a solution actually helped deploy a very simple tool that we call Rapid Response FAQ web widget that can be easily and quickly deployed on a web page. So organization can help customers get answers quickly, and also answers that are not only related to COVID, but related to the organization as a whole, but most of all getting 24/7, because I think that's where the frustration were coming from customers not being able to be served when they had questions, and they had to either try get someone over the phone or send an email, and obviously wait for a long time. So these customers in particular that went for that very quick and simple solution to sort of answer the challenges brought by COVID could really leverage the AI technology in a very quick and simple way. And most of all, having their customers and employees sort of be supporting and not having to scroll down through very long FAQ documents, for instance. But what's really important as well, I think in this way, the customers have really been able to rapidly go through deflecting the volume of calls and emails as well they were getting, because that was really the struggle as well. How do you ensure that with a limited call center now, people working in your environment, you can actually handle that volume of inquiries? So having a simple AI solution very quickly deployed help these customers sort of get through COVID challenges.
Great. Wonderful, thank you. They're really, really fascinating insights. What I'd like to do now, really, sort of in the last sort of 9 or so minutes of the panel, is really look at the road ahead. And I'm going to ask you to kind of confine your comments to probably about a couple of minutes, so we could just kind of have some key headlines. So we get so listeners of the debate today can come away with lots of ideas about what the road ahead looks like. And I'm going to start with you, Magdalena, if I would. Again, thinking about your fintechs and thinking about their end customers, you know, at a time when arguably budgets are constrained and priorities are focused elsewhere, what advice do you give to your members to make sure when they're looking at the road ahead, they're going to be successful?
Well, I think one advantage in this scenario is that budgets are constrained, but there are key priorities, and the projects that are prioritized, they will be pushed through and potentially pushed through and accelerated at a much greater pace, especially when it comes to anything digital transformation wise. And there's a lot of fintechs out there that can help with that. So we recommend kind of continue doing your business development, and a lot of the focus for my team is to continue building on different engagement models where we help our fintechs to connect in, and that's really key, because the interactions you have now with your customers will look very different from being able to meet face to face and go through a demo and do these more very like light touch in one sense, but now we're trying to get the conversation a little bit more focused. So identify key stakeholders, also identify key support functions, because there's a lot of organizations now going out wanting to help. So in fintech, for example, Innovate Finance doing an amazing job. They want to connect, help their members connect with corporates. They want to provide resources around what's needed to kind of build up business resilience and operational excellence, and really go and, as a CEO and a founder, go and ask for what you need from some of these organizations, and you'll be surprised. Maybe you'll actually get you'll get returned back.
And it definitely feels like there's a real sentiment of wanting to help people be successful, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out our customers' new need. So for us, it's really important to understand, how do we serve our customers in this new world? And the only way we learn is our customers or our kind of key stakeholders telling us.
And of course, a really key way to answer that question is to turn to Celine at this point and think, when you think about on enterprise scale, because a lot of the fintechs are selling into enterprises. You know, so what, as we look ahead, what are your clients particularly focused on at the moment?
Well, so definitely we see a big shift towards digital and AI technology. But I think more than ever, organizations should stay agile, and so should the system and the technology they use to support and drive customer experience. So we see clients really focusing on AI technology like natural language processing, and how it can be part of a more strategic support digital engagement and empower employees as well. I gave the example of this rapid response web widget that we put in place to support organization quickly, but that has really actually helped empower many companies to get into the first phase of their digital journey, from responding to a crisis to the next step of their digital journey by starting to build the pillars of their digital engagement strategy with more advanced AI features, data-driven insight, that our full platform offers. So if you look at our existing Bolt 360 customers, for example, they're now looking at scaling the solution even more through different functions and businesses within the organization to have a more consolidated digital approach, and also ensure that they cover the entire customer journey, and offer more online services. So I think the economic consequences of the coronavirus will really increase the need for banks or financial institutions to improve efficiency and customer experience. COVID is giving us the opportunity to look at how differently we can run business, but I think it made us aware as well of our weaknesses and what we are lacking to truly support and provide great customer experiences. So moving forward, the finance industry will change for sure. And in fact, I think it has started to change by enhancing some of these great digital self-service tools. But this changing will be about really, again, adapted to this new normal, as we call it, and what will be the beyond as well of this new normal, to make sure that financial institutions listen and are capable of effectively respond to customers' ever-changing needs. So,
Sorry, forgive me. Well, I wonder if I could just pick up on that, because actually what the new normal and beyond looks like. And I bring in Diana here because obviously you're thinking about, right the way across the UK, thinking about how you've been helping those customers, but also as they're not only as they're getting through coronavirus, but actually arguably going into one of the biggest economic downturns as well. What is it you're particularly focused on in the road ahead?
I think there's two things. It's once this is the time for technology for sure. So open banking, machine learning, big data, behavior biometrics, cloud technology, etc. But it's also the time to make all that technology more human and more personalized, and to ensure that we can offer each of our customers the banking solution that they need. So I mentioned that in my FTT chat as well. The digital customer now is every customer, right? And we need to keep that in mind. The other thing is that after Corona, I think not only the financial impact it's going to have in the world, not only the country, but it is also how people will be reprioritizing. I think this has made us all think a lot about how we're living our lives, what do we want our lives to be in the future, and also has put on the table that we need to prepare for something that we couldn't even think of some months ago, which is what's happened with Corona, right? People will be probably behaving very differently with their finances, and we're yet to see what that actually means, but we will need to shift probably our offering and our services and our products and banking solutions to adapt to what has to come in that sense as well.
Yeah, makes sense. And then also thinking about because when we're looking at the world we don't know, but actually in our obsession of trying to figure out what that on earth that looks like, is I'm interested to know what we're at risk of overlooking. And Caroline, let me come to you at this point as well. What are we at risk of just completely being blindsided by or not looking at?
I mean, I think maybe partly to echo what Diana was saying. So, I think when people do return to work, there's going to be another new normal. We've adjusted to one new normal, and then we're going to have a return to work where maybe not everyone's back in the office. You're going to have some people working from home, some people working more flexibly, some people in the office. And, we were in a situation where everyone knows how it works if everyone's in the office. You've got your networks. Outside of the office, everyone has their networks. If you're split up, are people going to fall through the cracks? So I think that's something to think about. I think clearly, just on a pure regulatory point of view, the regulatory implementation timeline continues. So there has been forbearance on some obligations, but a lot of them are going to carry on the same timeline. So things like LIBOR transition, things like ESG regulation are continuing very much on the same timeline. So, it's important not to lose sight of that while you're dealing with, obviously, the very important issues coming out of the crisis. And then I think probably my final point would be just to mention what the period of disruption might mean for future regulation. So if you think about the last financial crisis, it led to over 10 years of regulatory reform. So what kind of regulatory reform are we going to see coming out of this situation? And I think themes that we've seen coming from the regulators, at least in the UK and the EU already, I think very much echo points which the panel's already made. So focus on the client experience, conduct. We've seen the FCA and the PRA very much focused on how banks are helping their clients and making sure that they're addressing any possible conflicts of interest which come out there. And then I think on top of that, there's the governance and the technology issues as well. You know, we're seeing a lot of uptake of new technology, increased uptake of existing technology. And I think there's going to be a lot of focus of the regulators on that. And, you know, thinking about whether they need to update existing regulation or whether we need some kind of new regulation to deal with any kind of new risks which are being uncovered.
Which is probably the perfect way to end this this discussion, because we've talked about everything, not only what happened the moment lockdown happened and where your focus was through multiple different perspectives and lenses, which has been fascinating. Also thinking about, you know, how the technology has helped navigate the last 2 months. And as we look ahead in terms of, you know, the opportunities that exist for some of the biggest companies, enterprise scale innovations, banks, and how you serve customers. But of course, at the heart of all of this lies the governance, the regulation, the operational risk, and of course that journey never stops. Caroline, Diana, Magdalena, Celine, thank you all so much for your time today. It's been a fascinating discussion, and to everybody who's tuned in to watch, thank you very much indeed. My name is Julia Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia.